So you're fresh from the Houses of Parliament. What is it that you were doing there?
I got invited actually to an event at the House of Lords yesterday. It was for Your Juno, and Simran Kaur was the head keynote speaker. It was all about the gender investment gap and the growing gender investment gap we have in the UK and worldwide at the moment. Yeah, it was really about how do we get women investing and learning more about finance.
And what were the conclusions? Like, what are the takeaways that you can sort of implement to decrease that gap?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we're kind of there's a big problem at the moment once women have children about getting back into the workplace. As we all know, we've been experiencing extremely high costs, and that's kind of manifested into childcare. And then once you go back to work, having some sort of flexible working arrangement. Some of the more archaic, old money, older companies want everybody sitting at a desk 9 to 5. And obviously that just doesn't work for mothers. And what that does is then cause issues when it comes to investing, because they're not bringing in their own income. So the investment gap widens because the men in the relationship often are the ones going back to work. They have their own money and therefore they invest. And so, yeah, there's kind of a widening gap at the moment. So we were discussing lots of different ways that we can try and help with that. And a lot of it comes down to education, which is obviously a big part of what I do. Yeah, just educating women and men in general, really, about money and the journey that they can go on with investing from a young age right through to their later years.
So where does that desire to share that information from? Because you would have thought, having learned all the ways to invest or generate income, surely you want to keep all those secrets to yourself. Why share them with everyone else?
Good question. So just to answer the latter part of that question, the more people that invest, the better it is for me, the better it is for them. So the more money that goes into the markets, the more money we all make. And that's just how life works. So for me, I left university, I studied music, and then I set up my own business at university. I spent absolutely everything I earned. I got myself into quite considerable amounts of consumer debt. As we all know, when we turn up at university, first day, they're like, here's a bank account and here's £2,000 overdraft and here's a credit card. And you're like, whoa, let's go, man. And like, it can, freshers week, suddenly you're into that kind of lifestyle. And if you're not taught the value of a pound at home, which often we aren't because our parents weren't educated about personal finance, just like we aren't to this day, in schools, we can kind of lose our way a little bit. And especially when you're dumped in this new city and you've got all these new friends and you kind of want to keep up with the Joneses and that lifestyle, you can go into debt quite quickly. And obviously that debt can manifest itself in different ways, and you can continually increase that. That I ended up taking payday loans out to pay that payday loan off, and this loan to pay that loan, that credit card to pay that. And suddenly I was in a spiral of consumer debt. And I'd always done pretty well. I left university, worked my way up to be one of the youngest heads of marketing at 25 in the hospitality industry. And I was earning a really great wage, but I was basically having all of this spare money that I have, I wasn't saving, I wasn't investing, I wasn't moving forward. I was just basically paying off debts and paying the minimum amount of debts, and actually paying most of it was actually just going to interest. And I quickly realized that this wasn't like what I wanted to do with my life. And so I was actually on a beach in Vietnam, paid for by a credit card to get there. And a friend of mine who was an entrepreneur at the time, he had done very well for himself at a young age, had set up a business, and essentially he turned around to me and said, when do you want to retire? And I was like, well, no later than 50, the standard, answer that we all say when we're young. Yeah, I'm not working past 50, no chance. And then essentially he said, when do you want to die? And I said, well, 80 would be a good innings. I think it'd probably be a good one. And then he said, well, how much do you spend a year in your life currently right now? And then he said, well, times that number by this number, and that number, what is it? And mine was like 1.5 million. And he was like, well, do you have that? And that's when I was like, well, actually, no, I've got minus £24,000 right now. So I realized right then that I needed to make a change if I wanted to be able to lead the life that I wanted to lead. And I just came back and went head first into it. And then just to kind of round this off, really, I noticed very quickly that all of the education out there was very US centric, like lots of great people in the US talking about this. We basically had Martin Lewis and that was it. And as much as Martin Lewis is fantastic, he doesn't really relate to young people as much as I felt at the time. I find it quite difficult to relate to some of the stuff that he was. His audience is very like Karen's in Northampton. And so I realized very quickly my marketing background, and I had this idea and I started teaching friends, family. In COVID, that kind of exploded where everyone had so much time on their hands and they wanted to learn and know more about personal finance. And I was like, right, like, you know, I'm just going to create a brand out of this, just see where it goes. Wrote a few blogs, did a few videos, and then it kind of took off from there, man. And we're here today.
So you're a big advocate for investing, but say someone looking at the stock market who doesn't know anything, they haven't consumed any of your content. It's just a lot of figures and graphs and they don't really get it. So what would you say is the best route to get into the investment journey?
Well, the beauty of technology these days have changed the landscape somewhat. Whereas now, before you used to be phoning up some guy in Liverpool Street in a big fat suit, probably not having, the best of times with in his personal life. You get the picture. We've all seen Wolf of Wall Street, right? That was what it used to be. When you used to want to invest, you used to have to phone these guys up. They would take a massive fee. But now we've got the access on our phones. So we can set up a stocks and shares ISA, which you can contribute up to £20,000 per tax year into, and you can invest with £1 today. You could be an investor within under 10 minutes. And that has changed the landscape so much. And within that, to answer your question, really, investing doesn't have to be complicated. There are, I like to use the chocolate box analogy. It's a really great way of understanding how these things work. Is that, let's say Apple stock is a Mars bar. We all get those kind of things together. When you buy a Mars bar or Apple stock, in this case, you buy that one company. So you're buying shares in that one company that will then fluctuate up and down over the day. If that company does well, it goes up. If it does badly, it goes down. And over time, you want it to do well, and that's where you earn profits. But when an investor that doesn't really understand the game, they can buy a chocolate box. So a chocolate box is lots of different of chocolates put into the same box. But when you go to buy it, like you would buy a box of Celebrations, you only pay the price of the box of Celebrations. So this is called a fund. And a fund is how you can invest in a wide range of the market in one single investment. And it's very easy to do that. And what that does is means that you're limiting your risk because you're allowing yourself to own a large portion of the market. Rather than relying on Apple doing well, you're relying on a larger portion doing well. So if one company does badly in that chocolate box, it's often balanced out by companies that are doing better. And that's a really great way for someone who doesn't understand investing and is quite scared and doesn't want to look at the graphs and doesn't want to look at all the financial reports, just to start investing. Another great way is look at things that you're interested in and walk around your house. And what do you buy on a daily basis? We've all got an iPhone. We've all got an iMac. We might have a Samsung phone. We might have, this type of toothpaste. We might really enjoy this type of food. Often if you make a big list of companies and people that you really enjoy, you can look into them a little bit more. And then that's also a good way to almost build your own fund by buying a selection of companies.
So even in the investing side of things, like where would someone go to even take the first step? Are there apps available? You talked about stocks and shares ISA. Where does someone go to get one of those?
Yeah, great question. So a little bit of research into finding the right one for you. There are different types of stocks and shares ISAs. There's ones that will hold your hand a little bit more. So there's providers out there that will work with you based on who you are as a person and then your appetite to how much risk you want to take. So often when you're younger, you're a little bit more willing to take a little bit of risk. Why? Because you have a longer time horizon until you necessarily need that money. So you're willing to take a little bit more risk. If you're in your older years, you take less risk because you don't want to lose any money potentially. So that is really important to obviously establish is a risk profile. So you can work with providers that will help you do that, and then they will build a portfolio for you So you don't even need to do all the hard work based on the answers that you give them. And that's an amazing way of getting started and taking the pressure off really learning. And then as you learn more over the years, you might decide, I'm going to move into another type of stocks and shares ISA, which is called a DIY, or do it yourself. And that's where you pick everything yourself. And usually you get to that point once you've kind of learned and picked up a little bit. And what that does is kind of bridge the gap from where it used to be very much DIY. You had to know everything and there was nothing else. And now we've got this whole support system. And a stocks and shares ISA is fantastic because you can invest up to £20,000 per tax year into the entire ISA environment, and any capital gains. And so if you sell that company for a profit over time, or you earn interest or indeed a dividend as well, it's not subject to capital gains tax, which is a massive thing. So that 100% of the money is yours when you withdraw it, and you can withdraw it at any point. It's not then locked up for life. It's in there. That's a pension. If you invested into a pension, it would be locked up until you're 57. And so that's why stocks and shares ISA is so great. And if you get invested from a really young age, it's amazing. The power of compound interest really kicks in. Compound interest simply means where you invest £100 this year, and let's say I gave you 10% back, Joe, and then next year you'd have £110. And if I gave you that same 10% again, you're actually earning interest on top of the interest. And what happens is, it's like a snowball effect. Over time, you're earning interest on top of interest on top of interest. And eventually, the interest far outweighs the contribution that you put in. And that's how you can really, an average person investing just £100 a month can end up a millionaire by the time they get to retirement age.
How do the dividends work? So assuming you invest that £100, say, into a stocks and shares ISA, if you then take your dividend out, surely that then reduces the amount of money in the pot, and therefore it doesn't accumulate the compound interest. Is that incorrect? Or is that...
It's a good question. It's a really great question. And I get this question all the time. So when you buy a fund, you essentially have called an accumulation and a distribution. So you often see it when you log in. It'll be like ACC or DIST. And they do very different things. So an accumulation just means the dividend gets reinvested back for you. And a distribution means it gets paid out as a cash balance into your account. Now, let's say I buy, again, we use the same analogy of £100, and it gives me 3% dividend a year. That's going to pay me £3 for every £100 that I have in. And that's coming to me no matter what happens, whether it's performing well, up, down, left or right, that dividend is being paid to me. And that's why dividends are awesome, because you can essentially earn, that's almost fixed income. As long as they don't change the percentage allocation of it, it's fixed income which is coming to you, and it doesn't affect the £100 which you had invested in the first place. There's extra money on top. So you could, if that company, that fund or that company did 10%, you're getting the gain there and the 3% on that as well. So it can be almost like a double whap.
So let's take someone who's just come out of university and they've got their first professional job. They're finally getting a good income coming in. Are they better going down the investment route? Because you say it's better to start investing early, but they maybe want to save for a deposit, in a few years for a house. What's the best allocation of their income?
That's a really great question. I think it's very difficult to make big goals in your 20s, because we're just kind of figuring out who the hell we are at that point. Often we've gone into a job, we're not even sure if it's right for us at that point. But and we just kind of also want to enjoy life. We're being social at that point too. But making some headway with your finances early on, as we discussed, is a big deal. Now, a really great way at the moment, we have something called a lifetime ISA, which falls as part of your £20,000 contribution. And that essentially, you can put up to £4,000 in each tax year, which runs April to April. For those who don't know, that's the tax year. And essentially, the government give you 25% on top. So if you put in £4,000 in this tax year, you'd earn £1,000 from the government on top, which helps speed up the process of you getting a house. And let's say you meet someone nice, boy or girl, and you can both put your lifetime ISAs together and buy a house together. So it's a really great way of getting onto the property ladder, which, as we know, is bloody difficult for most young people. And so if you can set that up now, even if you just open it and put £1 in, it's a really just great account to have. And if you add to it a little bit here and there over time, that's awesome. You're still going to get the contribution back on it. From anything from £1 up to £4,000, you're going to get 25% on everything you put in there.
With buying, obviously we were discussing how difficult it is to get onto the property market. Do you see any financial merit in renting at all, or are you solely buying? Because obviously the benefits of owning a house are plentiful, and they're benefits that we all know. But is there actually any merit to renting?
It's a great question. Look, we're brought up as a nation to believe that our pathway is save all we can, buy a house, spend our whole life paying it off, maybe get mortgage free, and then try and save enough for a decent retirement. That doesn't have to be the way. There are lots of successful people out there that only rent and they will never buy, and they see the value in renting, and because they build businesses or they earn income which vastly outweighs the amount that they pay in rent. It's a decision that you need to make. Do you want to become a home owner and have security? Often people do because they want to pass something down. If they do have children in later life, this is something that you've got to think about. You don't necessarily have to make a big decision now, because it's going to take you a few years to save towards a house. So if you decide that money needs to be used elsewhere, and you're going to, go traveling around the world, and you might decide that another city is right for you and you're going to rent there. And so there are lots of different cases of when renting is better than buying. It's a lot more flexibility, certainly a lot less cost, but you are not building equity. That money is going into a landlord's pocket. So you're building that person's retirement pot and not your own. So that's something you do need to think about. And whether or not that's a pathway you want to take. Now, I rented until I was 33 years old. I'm 35. Until I was 30. 30. I'm 35 now. I've had a house for 4 years. It's a step that I wanted to take because I wanted to invest in property as I grow. Because once you get one property, you can remortgage and refinance, take money out and put it into a further property, which you can then rent back. So that's the property you'd be renting, would be the property that I invested into for that reason. So there are different pathways. And look, there's no wrong or right answer. You'll know as you build, but saving money to allow you to make that decision, whether you decide to use it on something else, is still very important. You're still going to need to set a substantial savings pot. And the reason why I say that is because, let's say your boss wakes up on the wrong side of bed tomorrow and goes, I am cutting that department. Or they have a big meeting, finance says, we don't need marketing anymore, and you cut. There's nothing you can do about that. If you don't have a substantial savings net and something which I call an emergency fund, you kind of up shit's creek without a paddle. You're in trouble at that point. And if you had an emergency fund and some saving, it becomes a little bit more of a financial inconvenience because you have the money there, which allows you to then bat off, get yourself another job, pay your rent, all your bills, and you're okay at that point. And that's often the first step of building wealth, is essentially getting your emergency fund sorted, which is often, they say, 3 to 6 months of pay. And if you can get to that point, honestly, it gives you choices, it gives you a lot more freedom with your money. And that's a really great first step. And I would do that first before investing my money.
You mentioned the buying a house and then remortgaging, and a lot of financial advisors, certainly American ones, all about, go into debt, then you can use that as leverage and then, refinance for capital, et cetera, et cetera. Could you just explain the whole remortgage situation to then get equity to reinvest?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, even when you buy your own house, you're still going into debt. So you still owe the bank that money. Technically, you own the house and the deeds on the land. You own that, but you are in a substantial amount of debt, often hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's about whether or not you decide to utilize further debt, essentially by remortgage. So let's say you own your house for 5 years. You start to build up equity by paying off your mortgage. So let's say you're paying £1,000 a month, mortgage a month. £500 is going towards equity building, paying off, that's your money. And then £500 is going towards interest. It's usually how it works. will be different calculations based on the house and the size and the rate that you get. But over a few years, the house hopefully has gone up in value. And obviously you've been building equity. You can then remortgage for the new value of your property. And either you lower your amount that you're paying in now and you just keep your one house and you pay that down, or you might decide to up your contribution, or you might decide to use some of that. But essentially, if you remortgage, you can pull money out to either do some renovations or put into a second property. So then you're taking on more debt. You do need a substantial amount to buy a buy to let. Often it's 25% deposit or more, rather than the 5 or 10% that you probably be looking at in the examples that in most first time buyer examples. So that's what happens. And then eventually, a couple of years down, someone's paying off. So then you've got someone else paying. So they're renting off you and they're paying down that mortgage, which is separate to your own personal property. And then over time, you might then decide to go again, but you can go again on both and extract more capital and then buy a bigger buy to let. And then over time, you go again, and that's how you build a property portfolio. And you can do that quite quickly once you start getting a couple of assets together, because you start pulling money from different areas. And then over time, hopefully they start paying each other off. And then you're left with 100% assets where you own the full property and you are then getting the full amount of rent coming to you as income. And that's where you can really, really start to accelerate your.
Say someone has about £50,000 saved up for a deposit. With the current interest rates, etc., are they better to buy now and start that journey of building a portfolio, or are they better holding off for 12 months or whatever until the interest rates go down again?
It's a really great question. I did a video on this the other day. The thing is, there's no wrong or right answer again, but majority of time, getting your foot on the ladder, whether that's today or tomorrow, is always better than next year, simply because the amount of equity that you will build up in the property over the time often outweighs the 1 or 2% that you might save on an interest rate, which is the difference of a couple of £100 versus a few £1,000s. And obviously within that time, you would hope if you bought well, then your property would have increased in value. So you'd have also missed out on the potential. So you'd then be buying in a year's time the same property at £10,000, £20,000 more than you are now. So you then got to find even more money for the deposit. You then owe more money on the interest, and actually that interest really does add up. So often it is, if you've got the opportunity to get onto the market, getting on is the hardest part for most of us in this country. And so if you have the opportunity, I would tend to look towards taking it, as long as it's a good investment house-wise.
A lot of your advice, if someone went through it about saving or investing, they could think, he has no fun with the money. Yeah, I want to enjoy my hard-earned cash. Are you the next generation of Kirsty Allsop who says that the current generation can't get on the property market because they have too many Netflix subscriptions?
Yeah, stop eating avocados, man. Yeah, no, look, I budget, and within my budget, there's a 10 to 15%, based on the time of my life, is always in there for fun. And then I also have a personal development as well, which can be 5 to 10%, and that's me buying books, doing courses, things to help me forward myself. So I absolutely factor. And then on top of that, there's savings and investments. And I'm absolutely a massive believer of we have to have a real balance, because shutting yourself in a room for 20 years just to save enough to get a house deposit is no life for anyone. Or shutting yourself in a room for 20 years so you've got enough for retirement, again, is no life for anyone. Finding a balance, and equally as well, utilizing some of your money that you earn to reinvest into yourself, is really one of the most powerful things you can do. Because if you take an evening course, you might be on £15 an hour, for example. And let's say you take that evening course and your same company will then pay you £22 an hour. That's a 47% increase. It's very difficult to get that anywhere else ever. So, and you've then immediately, and then you've got a bigger income for the rest of your days. And if you continue to do that, you can move up the food chain. So I don't believe education stops when you leave university or you leave school. In fact, that's where you can then now choose the pathways that you start to take, and you continually upskill yourself. I've moved out of hospitality marketing into personal finance education, and that's simply because I learned everything I possibly could, and I never stopped learning. And Steve Jobs said that, and I really do believe that's a mantra for life.
With your upskilling, if someone is in a role, and obviously there are lots and lots of different variables of different industries, is someone better trying to upskill themselves to then earn more within their business or within their wherever they work, or is it better to jump ship and go elsewhere?
Great question. I'm going to answer that in two parts. The first part is job hopping. The name of it completely escapes me right now, but anyway, job hopping. If you move jobs, so staying with one company for 30 years is great. Yeah, great, fine. Like, very loyal, well done, pat on the back. No one else cares, but your salary will, because job hopping often means you can go for higher salaries. And I think it's something like 30 something percent. You end up with a higher salary just by moving roles every few years. Now, when it comes to upskilling, so that's something you've got to think about. As much as your work might be a family and they, buy you pizza on a Friday, if they need to cut your role, they will. So understanding that early on is really, really important. Unfortunately, we're not nothing special. We're numbers at the end of the day, and we're there to fulfill a role. And if that role becomes redundant, then you are made redundant. And that's how that works. That's why we hear it all the time. Companies don't always perform well, and they will make you feel like everything's performing well because that's called company culture. They've got to keep everybody happy, so you keep performing. So that's, upskilling yourself outside of that, so you become more valuable as a person. Now, you may decide that helps your role, which then allows you to then go and get better roles within the field of work that you currently ensue. Or you could look to upskill yourself. So you may have an idea knocking around in your brain, but you've gone into the work environment to try and build up your skill set, and get a little bit of like, I want to go and work for a couple of entrepreneurs. I want to work for a few businesses. So I feel like I understand business a little bit more. And while I'm doing that, I'm upskilling myself so I can eventually go and put this idea that's sticking in my head into practice and go and build a business. That's what I did. I worked in marketing. I worked right up from marketing exec to marketing director. I knew the whole food chain. And then all of the time outside of that, I was learning about personal finance, learning about business, learning about entrepreneurship. So when I did take the plunge, I was ready. And I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, young people. The average successful CEO is 47, and the average successful business founder is 52. So if you're sitting there and you're 23, 24 listening to this, don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. Often going and working for an entrepreneur in a small startup, if that's what you want to do, if you want to start a business, go and work for someone where you're touching every point of the business, because often in these small companies that are like 10 people or less, you're doing so many different things. You're not always doing like the role that was set out for you. You're often helping out. You're going to help out the events team while they run their event because they need an extra pair of hands. You learn how to run an event. And these are all skills that you would never have picked up otherwise. So yeah, don't put so much pressure on yourself at a young age, but do you think about things like job hopping and company loyalty? Because your HR team, they may say that they care about you, but they care about the company pockets at the end of the day.
With age comes responsibility sometimes of children. And a lot of people leave their assets, be it houses or stocks and shares, to their children upon death. But most of the time, when the children receive it, they're in their mid-60s or 50s, and they're pretty much sorted in life anyway. They have a house of their own, etc. So if someone is conscious to leave something to their children, but don't want to have to wait until they die to do that, what things can they be putting in place to help their children in those vital 20s and 30s?
It's a really good question. It's something that I need to learn a lot more about. I'll be really flatly honest with you, but there are trusts which you can set up, family trusts, where you can put assets to and equally invest as well for your kids. And then you also could have your family as company directors. Let's say you have a property portfolio. You can have your property portfolio in a limited business and your family as directors within that business. So there are lots of ways of doing these types of things. But yeah, I'm not the expert on that one. I will hold my hands up.
Credit cards, then. They're one that you have good expertise in. What should people do with credit cards? Because obviously you said that you were on holiday that was paid for by a credit card. A lot of people have been in that situation. So there's a real downside. Is there any merit to credit cards?
There's lots of merit to credit cards. Now I utilize them in a very different way. So first up, understanding the thresholds of credit is really, really important. You are borrowing money. You will need to return that money to that person.
What? Unbelievable.
You decide to... Exactly. I know, man. What? How dare they? Yeah, I thought this was free. And that's what I thought at university, man. Someone gave me the card, so there's no interest on it for 2 years. That's like wicked. I've got 24 months to run this party down. And I did. And that's the wrong way of looking at credit. Credit is not like that. If you use it in the right way, it can help boost your credit score, which when you, let's say you do try to go and buy a house, the better your credit score, the better rate they give you. So you end up paying less. So treating credit like that is a really cool way of doing things. But also, I run my entire life now through my American Express card. And that's simply because I just build up points. My flights, which I've just booked, I'm off on holiday next month, I didn't pay for them. They were points. So I've earned a lot of points over the years from my Amex card. And then I pay down my Amex every single month before it's due. So that shows to the credit providers that I am great with credit. It's taken me a long while to get to this point, and I had to have a little break from credit and then bring myself back into it. But understanding that, and obviously utilization is a massive, massive thing. So what's a really good idea is having a credit card and running through some subscriptions like your Netflix and things that are fixed every month. You run them through that credit card and they just get paid off like a direct debit, comes out of your account each month. You've budgeted for that cost, so you know it's there, you know it's happening. And that just shows regular credit, you're using it, things are going through. And this is great for credit card providers. But your utilization is really important. Try not to get over 30% at any point with that card because it will affect your credit score. And also the length of time that you can work with a credit card provider is also great. So if you can work with them for a number of years, this helps your credit score. So often I've kept some of mine open 7, 8, 9 years, and I paid them off. I kept them open, and I put a Netflix subscription on this one, and I put Riverside food subscription on that one, and I just pay it off, and that just shows that I'm responsible, basically.
If we take a broader view of things, so obviously there's the personal side, but from the political side, and obviously you're fresh from the House of Lords, so you'll know all about this stuff. A lot of the situation we're in now, people will say, it was Liz Truss, sodding Liz Truss. What did Liz Truss and those Trussonomics, what was that actually? And how has it impacted the national economy as a result?
Oh, it's such a great question. How long you got?
Unlimited time.
Look, at the end of the day, what that meant was that it forced interest rates to go higher overall. It basically sent the market into shockdown. It was a new form of politics that they were trying to bring in a nutshell for people listening to this. We won't bore you with the specifics. The markets, the credit companies, the mortgage providers did not like it one little bit. That's essentially why Kwasi and Liz didn't last as long, because it was quite out there what they were doing. In theory, it sounded great, but actually taking on more debt to pay off the debt that we currently have, when we're already in astronomical debt as a nation, just meant that, we weren't ever really going to accept the ideas that they had. It has really hurt us. Off the back of this UK that we currently live in, we've come off Brexit, where we haven't dealt with that very, very well. Again, on paper, it sounded lovely and all rosy, but it meant that we needed to secure new trade deals for this country, and we haven't done that to the best of our ability. So Did I vote for Brexit? No, I didn't at the time, but I do. If you look at it again, it's like, it sounds great, but they didn't put it into action. So we've had Brexit, then we've had COVID, then we've had Liz, and then we've had a massive inflationary environment. And so this country has been battered from all sides for a long, long time. So I do hope that if we have we have an election, that the upcoming government will hopefully try and stabilize things. Because I did a post a couple of days ago actually about the average costs from 2020 to now, and the average food cost has risen. So a personal food basket has risen by 68% in 4 years, which is very, very difficult for the average everyday person who is on, UK average salary wage or less to be even able to afford. So you start having to cut in different areas, which often is savings, often is investments. And then it becomes actually like things that you enjoy. And once you start knocking off those things, people start to get quite annoyed. And that's where we are at.
With the upcoming general election, if we have, say, a Labour government who come into power, are there going to be any stratospheric changes in the fiscal or economic policy that you can see from the outside, or will it pretty much just be business as usual?
It might look like that for a little while, because even coming up with the policy and then getting it through a parliament, it has its own challenges. So will we see change immediately? Absolutely not. And I do kind of urge people to be cautious about, yes, people might have their qualms with a Tory government, but the grass is not always greener on the other side. I do believe that we are kind of due for a change of government at this point, but it's going to significant challenges for a Labour government to make any changes which actually impact the pockets of everyday people. Things I would really be wanting to see is, impact on childcare. I would want to see something like a rental cap. At the moment, it's just got out of control, especially in London. My sister's paying like $2,500 for a house, which is semi nice, but it's ridiculous. When she's in her late 20s, how we expect young people to be able to run their lives like that is wild. Childcare, rentals, and then trying to bring some sort of balance to the cost of living that we have at the moment. If we put money back into the pockets of everyday people, it's going to help the economy, it's going to help more savings and investments, and essentially we're all going to be better off for it. But that's wishful thinking at the end of the day.
So that's the future of the nation. What's the future for Sammie?
Oh, good question. Well, we've just put out a program, actually. I believe one of the big things for people is how to increase their income. And if we're getting shut down and squeezed in other areas, then utilizing some of our time to side hustle and create businesses, which we really enjoy and love. There was a study recently, over 86% of people hate the jobs that they work in. And that's something which really struck with me. And I couldn't believe that. We go to university, we study something that we enjoy, but often we end up in different areas of the work environment. And so building something which you're passionate about and doing something that gets you up in the morning with a spring in your step is massively important. And whether that be a podcast like this one, or that might be an Instagram channel where you give tips about something which you're an expert in, or you don't even have to be an expert. That's one of the key things as well. You can just share your thoughts and feelings with people, and people resonate with people if you have a unique perspective on something. So we've launched a program teaching people how to start their own businesses and set up social media accounts and sell digital products. And that's been going really well. We've got over 350 students now in that program. It's really, really cool seeing the changes that it's having on people's lives. Some of them are doing really great already. There's one guy that did £5,000, his first £5,000 last month, which is a massive salary. If you look at it, the course of a year, that's 60 grand. That's not bad. Just from posting stuff on social media for 90 minutes a day, it's not bad. So I really believe that's something I'm going to be doubling down on. And then just educating as much as possible. We have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel, we have a website. There's over 300 free guides on there. put out a YouTube video a week, a podcast every week, and video on social media pretty much every day. So just trying to spread the good fight, man. Fight the good fight, man. I suppose that's all I can do, and hopefully help, impact and change a lot of people's lives, and just give people the knowledge that they should have had in school.
What a message. What a message. What an impact. What a man. Sammie, thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Loved it.